Notre Dame is nearing the end of spring practice, and we've already seen some major developments that could define the 2025 season. From the passing game step forward to some surprising standouts on defense, we're breaking down the top 5 most important developments from spring practice on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and happy Friday, everybody. Today is Friday, April 4th, and thanks for getting a head start on your weekend by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, I wanted to ask that you please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We're actually getting pretty close to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. And does it mean anything? I'm not really sure, but it's a cool number. Also, if you missed yesterday's show, I would highly encourage you to go check it out once we're done here. I got the chance to catch up with former Notre Dame captain Matthias Farley. Really good interview, so go check that out if you haven't done so already. But this episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized. All right, we have got another Top 5 Friday in store for you today. This is a segment we're going to continue to roll out throughout the offseason. I'm going to rank the most important topics surrounding Notre Dame football. Also going to do some Notre Dame basketball rankings at some point. And with spring practice in full swing, the Jersey Scrimmage just one day away, or at least we think it's going to be the Jersey Scrimmage on Saturday. We're breaking down the top 5 most important developments in spring practice so far. We'll dive into why the passing game is set to take a major step forward, how one unexpected unit could be a strength instead of a weakness, and why a key offensive lineman might be making a move that could turn him into one of the best in the entire country. Plus, we're going to discuss an underrated defensive group that's quietly improving and how roster turnover is impacting this team. But we begin with what I believe is the most important development so far. I think the passing game is going to take a big step forward in year 2, regardless of who the quarterback is. No matter which quarterback ends up being the starter, whether it's Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, or CJ Carr, they are going to walk into a terrific situation because they have the best running back in the country and one of the best running back tandems in the entire country with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. They're going to have an improved wide receiver room. I say cautiously, right? Because we have talked about the wide receiver position a lot in recent years, and every year we think it's going to get a little bit better. It does, but it's never quite as much as we hope. But now with Malachi Fields and Will Pauling in the mix and expected leaps from Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, I do think the wide receivers are going to be a lot better. Tight ends I have some questions about, but I think the offensive line is going to be one of the best in the entire country. Notre Dame's offense was not very consistent last year, and I think improvement here in the passing game could make the difference between this being like a really good team and a great team. Again, regardless of who the quarterback is. Last year, they finished 49th in pass efficiency, which is average, I guess, but they were 118th in the country in yards per completion. They just could not push the ball downfield, and whenever Notre Dame got in third and long situations, you might as well just hand the ball to the other team because they probably weren't converting it. They need to be more effective downfield. Now, part of that was on Riley Leonard. I love the guy to death. What he did for this team, this university, we could go on and on about what Riley Leonard did for the Notre Dame football program and just how good he was as a runner. But I think we can all agree that he was not very accurate as a passer, or certainly not as much as Notre Dame needed him to be, especially on deep balls. And part of that is on the wide receivers as well. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, had some very strong quotes about the passing game when he spoke to the media this week. He said, quote, "We were not very confident in anything we did in the passing game a year ago. That I think you'll see take a huge leap in year 2. End quote. He also had something to say about the wide receivers. Quote, "We dropped the football way too much last year. We gotta make the plays." End quote. He also made the point that it shouldn't really matter who the quarterback is if you're the wide receivers, because the wide receivers need to know where to be. They just got to get there. And if the ball's close to you, then make the play. So when you look at all of this and you think about, okay, the offensive line is going to come back. A lot of these guys have experience now, which wasn't the case last season. The running backs are going to get better. The wide receivers should be better. Like, everything is pointing to this offense taking a big step, and a big part of that is on the passing game. And I think with your second year under the same offensive coordinator, which hasn't been the case, Notre Dame had Tommy Rees, Jared Parker, and then Mike Denbrock in 3 straight seasons. Those are 3 different offenses, and I think now everyone on that offense should be a lot more comfortable. They need to know where to be, and they actually understand the why more. Because, you can memorize where to go on a route or on a blocking assignment, but without understanding the strategy, like why the play is designed that way, you're going to struggle to adapt when the defense shifts or they run some sort of variation that you weren't expecting. So when you actually understand the reasoning behind it and you understand what Mike Denbrock wants to do with his offense, you're not just executing, you're able to read, react, and make smarter decisions on the fly, which is why I'm very confident this offense and this passing game is going to take a big step forward. And Mike Denbrock's track record is really, really good. When you look at his second year as the offensive coordinator, every single time the offense improves significantly. Year 1 at LSU in 2022, they finished 24th in scoring offense. Year 2, they finished first in the country. It also helps to have Jane Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But hey, the point remains, they got a lot better. When he was at Cincinnati, his first year there in 2017, they finished 111th in scoring offense. But in year 2, they finished 23rd. They improved by 2 entire touchdowns, 14 points per game. You could even go back to his time at Notre Dame. Year 1 in 2014, they finished 38th in scoring offense. Year 2, they finished 34th. It wasn't that big of a jump, but it was still a jump. Notre Dame finished 10th in scoring offense this past season. Could they bump all the way up to the top 5? That's going to probably depend on the quarterback play, but I do think that they are going to be better and more effective on offense, specifically in the passing game. So that is a very big development on the offense. On the defense, I think the defensive line could be much better than we expected. And that's huge, right? I had this as one of my biggest question marks heading into the spring, but early signs point to it being a strength. Most of my questions were directed on the interior, and I think early returns on Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, who's projected to start at the nose guard position, have been very encouraging. Like, I think we're already hearing more about Jared Dawson during spring than we heard about R.J. Oben last year. I think we can all admit the R.J. Oben experience, for the most part, was pretty disappointing at Notre Dame, with the exception of one enormous play against Georgia. But honestly, we're hearing more about Jared Dawson in spring than we heard about Javonte Jean-Baptiste 2 years ago. And if Dawson can be as good or better than Javonte Jean-Baptiste was in 2023, but on the interior as opposed to strong side end, which is what JJB played, that could change everything for this defense. Al Washington called him a disruptor, and if he's able to disrupt the middle of that defense and you give some room for the linebackers like Drake Bowen, Jalen Snead, KVA to make some plays, that opens up a lot of things for Chris Ash's defense. Also, Jason Onye is back and ready to go. That's a huge development in its own right, but it really helps out the interior on the defensive line. And so far, knock on wood, Gabe Rubio's healthy. He's out there. Donovan Heinisch is ready to go. He looks like he's getting bigger and stronger and ready to go. So those are 4 quality players that can hold up on the interior. And then who knows what's going to happen with Elijah Hughes and Armel Mukum. So I still have some questions about the depth at defensive tackle, but right now everything is trending up at that position. And on the edge, looks like Jordan Botelho could be a full participant by this summer. That's huge. I certainly did not expect that after the serious injury that he suffered against Purdue. Boubacar Traore might not be on the same path as Botelho in terms of his recovery, but it sounds like he's going to be ready to go by fall camp, and those are going to be the top 2 Vipers on this team. But let's say Botelho or Traore deal with some sort of setback and aren't 100%. Well, they bring back Junior Tuihalamaka, who really saved the season for Notre Dame last year when he had to fill in for those guys when they were hurt. Plus, Bryce Young at strong side end, I think he's going to be a breakout star. And also, Josh Burnham. As I've said many times in this podcast, I think he's one of the most underrated players on the entire team. So they are strong on the ends, and I feel like the interior is getting a lot better. And I feel like the fact that Notre Dame isn't even pursuing David Bailey from Stanford, or at least not seriously pursuing, shows you how confident they are in their defensive ends. And if you're unfamiliar, David Bailey is one of the best players, probably the best player on Stanford. He's been a force on their defensive line, one of the few good things they've had going for them lately on the football program. Well, after they fired Troy Taylor, David Bailey entered the transfer portal. There were some Notre Dame fans who were like, well, Notre Dame should go after him, but it doesn't really make sense for him right now because they have so much talent on the edges. And the fact that they look at a guy like Bailey and they're like, you know what, we're good with the guys we have, that should show you the amount of faith and confidence that this coaching staff has in the defensive line. So if they are better than I expected, and a lot better, which is certainly a possibility, it elevates the entire defense, and this defense could be just as good as they were last year. And we know that was one of the best units in the entire country. But the defensive line isn't the only unit exceeding expectations. There's also a massive development on the offensive line that could turn one player into the best guard in the country. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs, and with Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You could get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first-inning runs, Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm picking Aaron Judge for more than 1 home run and Shohei Ohtani for more than 1 stolen base. It's that easy. Setting up a lineup takes less than 60 seconds, and when you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. I always take advantage of Taco Tuesday, where Prize Picks offers discounts on select player projections for even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, the third biggest development from spring practice so far is that Charles Jagusah has the potential to be the best guard in the entire country. And don't just take it from me, take it from offensive line coach Joe Rudolph, because that's exactly what he had to say when he was asked about Charles Jagusah getting some reps at right guard. We know that Notre Dame has a rich history of dominant linemen, and I think Jagusah moving inside could unlock his full potential. Honestly, since the moment that he came out of high school, even though he was a 5-star, depending on which recruiting site you were looking at tackle, there were a lot of people who openly wondered maybe he's best suited at guard, playing on the interior, maybe because of his feet, the way he moved, the fact that he was an all-state wrestler for so many years. Some people thought that he would be at his best at guard. And also, he probably projects as a guard at the next level just based on his height, weight, and his movement ability. So it felt like this was always kind of end that way. And if you don't believe me, just look at Zach Martin, who was an unbelievable left tackle for Notre Dame when he was in college. Then he got drafted by the Cowboys, played at guard, and now he is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. Is Charles Jagusah going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? I don't know about all that, right? We got to pump the brakes a little bit on this show, but Joe Rudolph made it clear that when Jagusah came in for an injured Rocco Spindler in the college football playoff game against Penn State, he was so good in that spot that it forced the coaching staff to kind of reevaluate everything. And now Jagusah has been getting a lot more work at guard this spring. They have not come out and said that this is a permanent move, that they are not going to play him at left tackle because that's where he was projected to start before last season. But if he's getting a lot of work there right now, I do think that's how it's going to end up. So if you have Charles Jagusah at guard, and he's one of the best in the country, like Joe Rudolph said he could be, and he's playing on the opposite side of Billy Schrauth, who also has the chance to be one of the best guards in the entire country, like that is a very strong force on the interior. I still think it's going to be Ashton Craig at center once he fully recovers from his ACL injury. And you look at those 3 guys, like going into last season, if you were to ask the Notre Dame coaching staff, like which 3 linemen are you most high on, they'd probably say Jagusah, Schrauth, and Craig. And that could be Notre Dame's 3-man interior at the start of next season. It also opens the door for more opportunities at tackle. Emil Wagner has right tackle pretty much locked up. I know that, there is a chance that maybe they consider moving Emil Wagner to left tackle, but I think that they feel very strongly about Wagner playing right tackle. He played 990 snaps at that position last year. I feel like he's got that locked down. Left tackle is a bit of a question mark, especially if Jagusah does end up moving to guard. It could be Anthony Knapp. And honestly, I didn't really think that was a possibility because I figured that Charles Jagusah was going to get the start at left tackle. And Anthony Knapp filled in for Jagusah really nicely last year. It was a little bit bumpy at the start. There were some plays against Texas A&M where he was getting beat by Stewart and Scorton. But you know what? That was his first college football game ever, and he more than held his own in that game. And then as the season progressed, he had some really dumb holding penalties. And it felt like every time Anthony Knapp got a holding penalty, it was like a loud holding penalty. They were calling back a big chunk play or even a touchdown. Like they had one called back against Georgia Tech. So that part was frustrating, but then he got a lot better as the year went on. And then there was that 98-yard touchdown play from Jeremiah Love, the first touchdown of the 12-team college football playoff. That was made possible because Anthony Knapp delivered a really strong block on Kamara. So I think he has an opportunity to start at left tackle. If it's not him, it could be Gerby Lambert, who redshirted last season, but myself included, there's a lot of people who think that Gerby Lambert could be a future first-round pick because he has all the physical tools and the traits, and it seems like he has the right mindset to succeed at tackle. But right now, Gerby Lambert is cross-training at right tackle and left tackle. Even if Lambert doesn't end up winning the starting job this year, I think that he is going to be getting a lot of, he's going to be the first guy off the bench because if Wagner gets hurt, then Lambert could go there. Or if Knapp gets to start at left tackle, he gets hurt, then Lambert could fill in right there. So the fact that Jagusah is moving over to guard, I think opens up a lot more possibilities on the offensive line. And then you got a guy like Sullivan Absher, who is more of an interior guy. But the fact of the matter is, Joe Rudolph has an embarrassment of riches on the offensive line. And he has the very difficult task of finding out the 5 best guys in that room. And then once he figures that out, these are the 5 guys that they're going to roll with, then he has to figure out where the pieces fit the best. And right now it looks like the Charles Jagusah piece could fit very nicely at right guard. Okay, 4th biggest development coming out of spring practice so far. Despite losing Jack Kaiser, I think the linebacker room as a whole could take a big leap in 2025. And I do not want to underestimate the loss of Jack Kaiser because he has done so much for Notre Dame, the football program, the university. He was there for 6 years. I mean, I remember when I was born, my first Notre Dame football game watching Jack Kaiser play back in 2003. It was awesome, right? Notre Dame beat Navy. Jack Kaiser had a sack in that game. But in all seriousness, the young guys, and I say young, like Jalen Seed's not young. He's entering his 4th year, his senior year with the program. These guys could all take a big leap, and I think that would make up for the loss of Kaiser. Look at Drake Bowen. Okay, going into last season, I thought that there was a chance that KVA could beat him out midway through. That was certainly not the case. Drake Bowen actually got significantly better during the second half of the season and was awesome in the college football playoff. You watch that Georgia game, it really popped out to me recently when I was going back and rewatching it because, what else am I going to do on a Saturday afternoon other than, it was more Saturday morning, I should say, than watch Notre Dame beat Georgia again for the 10th time. He was incredible in that game. That's going up against a very physical Georgia offense, even though their quarterback wasn't that great in that game. And when Chris Ash was asked about leadership on the defense, the first name he brought up, Drake Bowen. So I think he's the unquestioned leader of that room and of the defense. Jalen Snead, he's looking bigger, stronger, and faster. He was talking to the media this week, actually. He said that he's getting up to 238 pounds. Remember when he got to Notre Dame? I don't even think he was 200 pounds. And that's the reason why he redshirted, despite the fact that he was a 5-star coming out of high school. And they were like, wow, Notre Dame hasn't had a 5-star in a really long time. But he just wasn't physically ready to be a college linebacker. So as long as he's able to maintain that elite speed and athleticism at that weight, then we could see a big breakout season for Jalen Snead this year. And he was really effective at the end of last year. After that Louisville game, I was like, man, is he going to transfer? Because he barely played in that game, was not that good early on in the season other than some nice plays against Texas A&M, but then figured it out, came through, huge for the Irish down the stretch. And then Kingston Viliamu-Asa, he's a pro. That's exactly what Max Bullock called him 3 times, as a matter of fact. He said KVA is a pro, and I think that they're going to figure out a way to get him on the field. He can play the Mike. He can play the Will. So those 3 guys, I expect big things from them. And then Preston Zinter, a guy who hasn't been in the rotation for a couple of years, but is a mainstay on special teams. He does everything right, and he can't even get on the field. So you think about this room and the depth they have. I haven't even mentioned Man Framo, the early enrollee freshman, who was the crown jewel of this Notre Dame recruiting class. Thank God Notre Dame signed him on the last day because they did not really have a ton of momentum in that recruiting class until he committed on signing day. And Kingston Viliamu-Asa, who had a really impressive season as a true freshman, went out and said that he thinks Man Framo is going to be able to contribute for that room right away. So you lose Jack Kaiser, which is a huge loss, no doubt. But if Drake Bowen takes a leap, Jalen Snead takes a big leap, KVA takes a leap, you're feeling pretty good. Jay Nosbury, even though the season didn't really end that well for him last season, he was one of the most reliable defenders Notre Dame had for that middle portion of the season. I think he's ready to go. So they have a lot of really talented guys in that room that can do a lot of different things. And Max Bullock showed last year he was really good at rotating them and keeping that rotation balance. So they have star potential in the room, and they have depth. And I think that overall the linebackers are going to be a lot better next season than they were last year because these inexperienced guys have a lot more playing time under the belt. And I think that this defense, if that defensive line is not a question mark and it's a strength, and the linebackers improve as much as I think they can, this defense could be awesome next year. But while there have been some exciting developments, we cannot ignore the biggest challenge that Notre Dame is facing this year: roster turnover. Let's break down how that's impacted the team and what it means moving forward right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late watching all the tournament action, and 5 Hour Energy helps keep me up the next day. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Okay, the fifth and final development that we're going to be talking about today here is the roster turnover is significant. We knew that, right? This isn't breaking news that Notre Dame lost a lot of really good players after last season. But I think that when you see what's going on in spring practice and you hear the injury report and you see who's actually out there practicing, you realize that there's a lot of new faces out on that field and guys that Notre Dame is going to have to count on this season to play well. And even though I'm obviously high on a lot of these guys, we've talked about them a lot even on today's show, there is going to be some growing pains. There is going to be some drop-off at certain positions because when you lose a quarterback like Riley Leonard and you lose a leader like him, there are going to be some moments where you're going to be like, man, it'd be nice to have Riley Leonard right now, even if I think the passing game is going to take a leap. I think that the veteran leadership that he brought to that offense was huge, and I think that is going to be a void that needs to be filled this season. At tight end, Mitchell Evans, sure, he wasn't the fully formed version of him that we saw in 2023, making acrobatic catches against Ohio State, and at points it felt like he was the best player on the field. He wasn't 100% last year, but he looked really good and came through for the Irish several times. He had that awesome touchdown grab against USC there late when Notre Dame really needed it. Eli Raridan has a lot of potential, but we have not seen it yet, and losing a guy like Mitchell Evans hurts. On the offensive line, Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler might not have been starters, but those guys were unquestionably leaders of that group, and now that means some guys in that room are going to have to step up, not just on the field, but also as leaders in rallying that group around them. On the defense, they lost a ton. Howard Cross, great player, great leader. Riley Mills, great player, great leader. Jack Kaiser, I've already raved about him today on the show, but when you think about just the spine of that defense with Howard Cross, Mills, and then Kaiser there at linebacker, and then Xavier Watts behind him, that is a lot of experience that's gone. That's a lot of just really talented players who are now out the door. And even though Benjamin Morrison got hurt last year, I think he brought a real veteran presence to that cornerback room that now guys like Christian Gray are going to have to assume, because even though he's only played one season as a starter, he's going into his third year with the program. Leonard Moore is only going to be a sophomore. So there is a lot of leadership voids that need to be filled, and we've talked about it already, but it's not just leadership. All of these guys were very, very good and very, very productive players for Notre Dame. Riley Mills led the team in sacks last year. Jack Kaiser's been at the top of the team in tackles for the past 3 seasons. Xavier Watts is a 2-time All-American, so I'm excited about the guys behind them, no doubt, but not every single replacement is going to be as good as the guy who walked out the door. This is a young team. I certainly have very high hopes for this group, but there's going to be some growing pains, and I think that the Jersey Scrimmage, or whatever they're calling it, on Saturday will give us a clearer picture of who is stepping up and who's not. So when you look at this group and you look at this team and you look at the schedule that they're facing, there are plenty of reasons to be really optimistic. I truly believe the passing game is going to take a step forward, and I think that they're going to be a little bit more exciting on offense, throwing the ball downfield in another year of Jeremiah Love. That's all really exciting. But also, there's going to be some games where it's tight, and they're going to have to rely on a quarterback who hasn't been there before. What's going to happen then? Riley Leonard was able to come through in those moments with one notable exception being Northern Illinois. that stuff matters. On defense, if one team just kind of has the better of them one day, they're starting to move the ball, who on that unit is going to step up and get everyone together and say, hey, it stops here. They make a play when it matters most. In the past couple seasons, that's been Xavier Watts. That's been Jack Kaiser. So a lot of it right now is just up in the air. It's uncertain, which is, of course, going to happen in college football as guys get older, they leave, they go on to the NFL. This is the natural state of a really good college football program. So this isn't a unique situation, but it is a real situation that Notre Dame is going to have to overcome. And even though they've been recruiting well, they've been active in the transfer portal, some years, some teams take a step back, even though there's a bunch of talent on their team. Look at Georgia last year. They're always at the top in recruiting rankings every single year. Last year, they were still really good. Like, that was an awesome win for Notre Dame, but they weren't as good as they had been in years before. So this year, I'm not saying that Notre Dame isn't going to be able to make another run at the national championship. I mean, sure, they're going to have to catch some breaks like any good team, but there's just a lot of questions about this group, and so much of it has to do with the roster turnover. A lot of good players left. New players are ready to step up. We don't know how they're going to handle that spotlight until they actually go out there and do it on Saturdays. Some guys are going to exceed our expectations. That's going to be really fun to talk about it. And some guys are going to underperform or they're going to get hurt and it's just not going to work out like we had hoped. That happens for every team in the country. It's going to happen at Notre Dame, and it's just going to be a matter of this coaching staff, who has also experienced some turnover, to figure out the best pieces and then moving them in the right spot so they can excel and reach their full potential. See, now I'm using Marcus Freeman jargon, but overall, I think a lot of the reports that we have heard out of spring practice have been really positive, and I'm really excited to hear what happens in this Jersey Scrimmage on Saturday. I keep saying Jersey Scrimmage. Whatever the scrimmage is on Saturday, right? Because the media is going to be able to be there. There's going to be a lot more access to this one practice than any other thing we've been able to see so far this spring, and I think it's going to tell us a lot, not just about the quarterback competition, but everyone else. Which players are stepping up, which players and which units have a lot more room to grow. We are going to talk about that next week on the show, but that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Like I said, I'm going to be back on Monday, full reaction, Jersey Scrimmage, might even have a guest on as well. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And if you enjoy the show today, please give this video a like if you're watching along on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, rate the show 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. Have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you on Monday.